Do you see the color of this wine? It's so intense. Now here's a place with delicious wines, incredible terroir, history, and yet when you go there, it still feels very much like undiscovered wine country. So I want to dive into the wines of Paso Robles and find out what this region is all about. We'll be tasting the most famous wines from this region, including Cabernet Sauvignon, Syrah, Rhône Blends, and Viognier. Before we get busy tasting, let's back out to the background of what this region is all about so you have some context. So Paso Robles is actually made of 11 sub-AVAs, American viticultural areas. And we often throw York Mountain into the mix because it's right next door. This whole area actually makes up about 41,000 acres of grapes, which represents about 9% of what's planted in California. And by the way, it's about the same size as Napa Valley. If we back out to this region as a whole, we'll see that it sits at the 35th parallel. And by the way, my friends, that's going towards the southern part of where you can plant grapes. It's hot here, which means you're going to see more warm climate varieties do well here in this climate. That being said, there is one major influence that affects things in Paso, and that is the Pacific Ocean. It acts as a huge swamp cooler that brings in cool air into the region and keeps things cool. So you're actually going to see some differences. If you're in the western part of Paso Robles, in the areas of Adelaida, Willow Creek, Templeton Gap, and York Mountain, it's going to make cooler, more structured, more acidic wines. Then as you head east, it gets hotter and hotter and hotter until it's quite hot. And in fact, the only way we get quality there is tending to be planting in the higher elevation vineyards. And the reason why we can do that is because as you climb up in elevation, things get cooler and the temperature drops substantially at nights. That temperature drop that I'm talking about is called the diurnal shift. And it can range between 35 and 50 degrees in difference in Fahrenheit at night in Paso Robles, which is madness. There's one more amazing feature in Paso Robles terroir, and that is the soils. Now, on the eastern side of the San Andreas Fault, you will find the North American Plate. And then on the western side, which kind of starts at San Francisco and goes south, is the Pacific Plate. The soils on the Pacific Plate are different. Calcareous soils. What's that you say? Calcareous soils are limestone-based soils, and this limestone we've noticed as a geek to be exceptionally high quality for making fine wine grapes. So those are the features that define Paso Robles, but let's stop talking about it and start tasting the wines. Now the first wine we must know from Paso Robles is Cabernet Sauvignon, and that's because it's the most planted grape variety here. Now, taking a look at the color, it's actually kind of surprising. It is near opaque. I cannot see through it. Now, if we look at the rim and we see that purple color, we know this is a blue base, indicating this might have a higher pH. Cabernet is known for having this green bell pepper or green peppercorn-like aroma, but on this wine, here's what I smell. Blackberries, dark chocolate cake, and almost like black licorice. On the palate, Cabernet is definitely bold, but this puppy is even more bold and intense. It has ripe, fruity flavors followed by a rich, oily palate, and then a boom, mega finish, which has high alcohol. So if you're a fan of bold and ripe Cabernet Sauvignon wines, then this region should definitely be on your radar. Now the next grape variety that you must know from Paso is Petite Sirah. Actually, there are two. I would say it's Petite Sirah and Zinfandel. And the reason why these are important is they represent the oldest plantings in this region. The first commercial vineyard here was in 1882 by Andrew York in York Mountain, who was called Ascension Winery, and they had Zinfandel planted there. And by the way, that winery still exists. It's called Epic. Taking a look at this wine, wow, another deeply colored wine. This is also opaque and is a deep purple color. On the nose, it smells sweet and fruity like blueberry crumble cake, a little bit of crushed gravel, and a floral note like dried sage. Now, outside of the United States, Petite Sirah is very rare, and that's because it makes highly tannic, tart, and bitter wines with a very, like I said, really rough tannins. But here in this warm climate, it still has that really nice acidity that comes through, but we get those amazing sweet fruity flavors. And because we're getting so much ripeness in the grapes, it's not as bitter. It's actually quite fruity and bold. This next wine we're gonna try is a representation of a grouping of different wines and styles of wines that you'll find here, which are generally blends, either red or white, and we call these the Rhône Blends. Now, this particular wine is Mourvèdre, Grenache, and Syrah, but you will find a wealth of up to 20 different grape varieties planted here, blended in a myriad of different ways. Hot tip for you, if you're following ratings and scores and that kind of a thing, these varieties, Syrah and the like, tend to get the highest points from this region. Taking a look at this wine, this is another brutally deep color at another deep purple colored wine. I get a little bit of blueberry, a little bit of blackberry, some bacon fat notes, a whiff of sage, almost like aniseed. Let's give it a taste. Because this wine is a blend of different grape varieties, magical things happen on my tongue. First, an explosion of blue and black fruits, and then a boom, some acidity. Then we go into like the chocolate realm, and then it finishes almost with this oily, bacon fatty, sort of dried fruit note. Whoa, there was a lot going on in the glass here, which is another point to why these Rhône varieties are so popular from this area. Red wines aren't the only grapes planted in Paso Robles. In fact, you'll see many white grape varieties here, and you'll find them predominantly coming from those warm climates, such as the Rhône Valley. Now, one of those keen grapes that you'll see a lot of here is Viognier, and this wine is a blend of Grenache Blanc, Viognier, and Roussanne. This wine smells like yellow apple, lemons, honeysuckle, a little bit of lime peel, and almost a subtle whiff of vanilla bean. Let's give it a taste. This wine on the palate has a nice burst of flavor, goes into a rich, bold, oily mid palate, and then finishes with this nice lean lemon lime texture on the finish. Very complex, very interesting, and again, a white Rhône style blend. Now, the wines we tasted today are just a drop in the bucket of what we have here in Paso Robles. There are over 60 different grape varieties planted here and about 200 producers making unique, incredible wines that you have to taste. So if you want to know more about the region, I highly recommend checking out our independent guide that it features all the wineries and wines and all the information you need to know to explore and find your next bottle. If you like what we're doing here at Wine Folly, definitely subscribe. That's winefolly.com/subscribe, where you can join the Wine Info newsletter, where we will expose you to so many incredible wines around the world. Until next time, happy drinking. Peace out.